But wait, before we begin, please subscribe to ensure that you never miss out on any of my essential stuff. Comment "I subscribe" below, and I will personally welcome you to our community. With that said, let's get started. There are quite a few laws that don't make headlines, laws that don't come up in travel guides, laws that are perfectly normal parts of Malaysian legal life that a visitor from another country would have absolutely no reason to even consider, until they become a problem. So this video is specifically for those, not the obvious ones, the overlooked ones, the ones that are quietly sitting in Malaysian legislation waiting for someone who didn't do their homework. Let's go through them. 1. Your prescription medication might be illegal here. This one has caught out a genuinely shocking number of travelers, and it almost never gets talked about. Medications that are completely legal, doctor-prescribed, and freely available in your home country can be classified as controlled substances in Malaysia. And bringing a controlled substance into Malaysia without the proper documentation is a serious offense under the Dangerous Drugs Act, the same legislation that governs the drug laws we discussed in the previous video. Some of the most common examples: tramadol, a painkiller prescribed routinely in the US, UK, Australia, and across Europe for everything from post-surgical pain to chronic back pain, is a controlled substance in Malaysia. Certain benzodiazepines like diazepam and alprazolam, commonly prescribed for anxiety, panic disorder, and sleep issues, are controlled. Certain ADHD medications, including some amphetamine-based drugs, are controlled. Codeine-based cough syrups in quantities above what is considered personal use can trigger scrutiny. The key here is not that you cannot bring these medications into Malaysia. You can, but you need to do it correctly. For any controlled or prescription medication you are bringing with you, carry the original prescription from your doctor. Carry a letter from your doctor on official headline explaining your medical condition and the necessity of the medication. Keep medications in their original pharmacy-labeled packaging. And for stays longer than 30 days or for larger quantities, you may need to apply for a permit from Malaysia's Ministry of Health in advance of your trip. The moment your medication is in an unlabeled container, loose in your bag, or in packaging that doesn't match your name, you have a problem at customs that your explanation alone may not be able to resolve quickly. Sort your documentation before you leave home, not at the airport, before you leave home. 2. Flying your drone without a permit. If you are a content creator, a travel photographer, or someone who simply loves aerial footage, listen very carefully to this one. Because drone laws in Malaysia are strict, they are actively enforced, and the penalties are not trivial. Under the Civil Aviation Authority of Malaysia, CAAM, regulations, flying a drone in Malaysia requires registration of the drone and in many cases a permit before you fly. This applies to foreign registered drones brought into the country, it applies to recreational use, it applies to commercial use, and it applies regardless of the weight of your drone, though heavier drones face more stringent requirements. Beyond the registration requirement, there are extensive no-fly zones across Malaysia that are not always obvious to a visitor. The obvious ones, around airports, around military installations, most people would think to check. But the no-fly zones also extend around certain government buildings, around the Petronas Twin Towers and the KLCC area, around the National Palace, around certain communication infrastructure, and in designated areas during specific events and public gatherings. Flying in these zones without authorization can result in your drone being confiscated immediately. It can result in a fine of up to 100,000 ringgit. In serious cases, particularly around sensitive government or military infrastructure, it can result in criminal charges. The CAAM has a dedicated portal for drone registration and permit applications. Visit it before your trip, not when you land. The process takes time. The enforcement on the ground does not wait for you to complete it retroactively. And one more thing, even in areas where flying is technically permitted, fly with care and common sense. Do not fly over people. Do not film individuals without their consent, and do not film near mosques, temples, or religious gatherings from the air. The legal and cultural sensitivities compound quickly. 3. Trying to convert a Muslim. This one is so far outside the experience of most visitors that it genuinely doesn't occur to them as something they need to know. But it is a real law with real consequences, and it is worth understanding clearly. In Malaysia, it is illegal to persuade, convince, influence, or attempt to convert a person who is Muslim to any other religion. This is not a new law. Versions of it have existed across the different state enactments for decades, and it is enforced at both the state and federal level through various pieces of legislation, including the control and restriction of the propagation of non-Islamic religions enactment that exists in multiple states. The penalties vary by state, but include fines, imprisonment, and in states with active Sharia enforcement, additional penalties under Islamic law for the Muslim individual who is targeted. Now, the vast majority of tourists are not traveling to Malaysia with any intention of converting anyone. But where this becomes relevant is in situations that might feel completely normal and conversational to a visitor. Sharing your religious beliefs enthusiastically with a new Malaysian Muslim friend. Offering religious literature or materials. Having a deep conversation about faith that slides into advocacy for your own religion. Inviting a Muslim colleague or acquaintance to a religious service or event. None of these feel like crimes in the culture most Western visitors come from. In Malaysia, where this law exists and is taken seriously, they can be. Have conversations about faith with genuine curiosity and mutual respect, but do not advocate, do not persuade, do not share materials designed to promote conversion. The line is real, even if it feels invisible. 4. Touching, feeding, or collecting wildlife. Malaysia is home to some of the most biodiverse ecosystems on Earth. Ancient rainforests, coral reefs, national parks containing species found nowhere else on the planet. And protecting that biodiversity is something Malaysia takes with legislative seriousness that a lot of tourists do not anticipate. Under the Wildlife Conservation Act 2010 and the Fisheries Act, interfering with wildlife, including feeding, touching, disturbing, capturing, or killing protected species, carries penalties that include heavy fines and imprisonment. And the list of protected species in Malaysia is extensive, covering animals that tourists encounter regularly. Proboscis monkeys, hornbills, sea turtles, orangutans, pygmy elephants, certain species of coral, even certain species of butterfly. Here is where tourists most commonly cross the line. At Bako National Park and other wildlife reserves, feeding the macaques or proboscis monkeys, even accidentally, even if the monkey approaches you, can attract a fine. At Sabah's beaches, disturbing sea turtle nesting sites or approaching nesting turtles in ways that cause them to abandon their nests is a criminal offense. At coral reef sites, touching or standing on coral, even a small piece, is illegal and actively patrolled. And here is one that almost nobody thinks about. Taking natural items out of national parks and protected areas, shells from protected beaches, coral fragments, certain plants, feathers from protected birds, rocks from certain geological reserves, is illegal under Malaysian law. What feels like picking up a harmless souvenir from a beach or a forest is in certain protected areas the removal of protected natural heritage. The fines are real, the enforcement does happen, and the excuse that you didn't know it was protected is not a defense. Enjoy Malaysia's extraordinary wildlife. Go to the parks, do the snorkeling, watch the turtles from a respectful distance. Just leave everything exactly.
7. Using unsecured Wi-Fi without authorization. This one will raise eyebrows, and I want to explain it carefully because the nuance matters. Under the Computer Crimes Act 1997, unauthorized access to a computer, which in Malaysian law includes a computer network or any device connected to one, is a criminal offense. The penalty is a fine of up to 50,000 ringgit, imprisonment of up to 5 years, or both. Now, connecting to your hotel's Wi-Fi with the password they gave you, completely fine. Connecting to a cafe's public Wi-Fi that is openly available to customers, generally fine. But connecting to a Wi-Fi network that is unsecured or unprotected without the explicit authorization of the owner occupies a genuinely gray legal area under this act. The more realistic application of this law for tourists is not about accidentally connecting to a neighbor's unsecured router. It is about being cautious with how you access networks in Malaysia, particularly if you are using tools like network scanning apps, or if your device automatically connects to networks it has seen before that happen to share a name with a Malaysian network. The broader lesson from this law is about how Malaysia's Computer Crimes Act is written very broadly. It has been used to prosecute people for accessing systems they were not supposed to access, for bypassing security measures on websites, and for activities that in many other jurisdictions would be considered minor infractions or not criminal at all. If you work in technology, in security, or in any field where you might be inclined to probe systems, be aware that the legal framework around this in Malaysia is significantly more aggressive than in many Western countries. 8. Wearing the wrong color at the wrong time.
This one sounds like it belongs in a satire piece. I promise you it does not. In 2016, during and around the Bersih pro-democracy rallies that were taking place in Kuala Lumpur, the Malaysian government invoked provisions of the law to restrict the wearing of yellow clothing associated with the Bersih movement in public. People were stopped, people were questioned. People wearing yellow in the vicinity of rally activity faced police attention simply on the basis of their clothing color. Now, Bersih rallies were highly politically charged events, and the yellow clothing prohibition was specifically tied to that context. This is not a standing law that will see you arrested for wearing a yellow t-shirt to the Petronas Towers on a random Tuesday. But here is the lesson. Malaysia has provisions under the Police Act, under public order legislation, under emergency regulations when invoked, that allow authorities to restrict behavior that would seem completely benign and protected in many other countries. The color of your clothing, the slogan on your shirt, the symbol on your hat. If you happen to be in Malaysia during a period of political tension, around a significant political event, or near a politically sensitive location, what you are wearing can become a legal matter in ways that are almost impossible to anticipate if you are not following Malaysian news closely. The practical advice here is simply awareness. If something significant is happening politically in Malaysia when you are visiting, an election, a major rally, a period of heightened political tension, pay attention to what is happening around you, follow local news, and be thoughtful about how you present yourself in public spaces.
9. Disturbing a religious procession or ceremony. Malaysia's calendar is full of religious events: Hari Raya processions, Hindu temple festivals, Chinese New Year parades, Buddhist ceremonies. These are not just cultural spectacles for tourists to photograph. They are active religious observances, and they are protected by law. Under the Penal Code, intentionally causing disturbance to a religious assembly, obstructing a religious procession, or behaving in a manner that injures the religious feelings of any class of people is a criminal offense. The penalties include imprisonment of up to 1 year and fines. Where tourists run into trouble here is almost always in the same way. They are trying to get a photograph. They push through a procession to get a better angle. They position themselves in a way that blocks the path of a religious ceremony. They use flash photography at close range on participants who are in states of religious devotion. They say something flippant or dismissive about what is happening within earshot of participants. None of these feel like crimes to the person doing them. They feel like tourist enthusiasm. In Malaysia, in the context of a protected religious observance, they can absolutely be treated as offenses. When you encounter a religious procession or ceremony, stop, move to the side, and observe respectfully from a distance. If you want to photograph it, do so quietly and without flash. Do not push forward. Do not make noise. Do not make jokes. Let the procession pass and be grateful that you got to witness it. That is the correct response, and it will keep you completely out of trouble. 10. Buying and exporting counterfeit goods. Malaysia's markets, particularly Petaling Street in Kuala Lumpur's Chinatown, are famous among tourists for counterfeit goods: fake designer bags, fake watches, fake branded clothing. They are openly displayed and openly sold, and the whole operation feels so brazen and normalized that tourists naturally assume it must be tolerated. It is not, legally speaking, tolerated. It is illegal. Under Malaysia's Trademarks Act and the Copyright Act, the sale and purchase of counterfeit goods is illegal. The primary enforcement focus is on the sellers rather than the buyers, and it is true that tourists buying a fake handbag from Petaling Street are not the main target of enforcement operations, but the buyer is not without legal exposure. More critically, exporting counterfeit goods out of Malaysia is where the risk escalates significantly. Many countries have import laws that treat counterfeit branded goods as contraband. Arriving at customs in the UK, the US, Australia, or many European countries with a bag full of fake designer items can result in confiscation, fines, and in commercial quantities, criminal charges in your home country, even if you bought them legally or semi-legally in Malaysia. And here is a specific Malaysia-side risk that most buyers don't consider. Enforcement operations do happen at Petaling Street and similar markets. They don't happen every day, but when they do, people in the vicinity, including tourists who are in the middle of browsing, can find themselves detained and questioned as witnesses or as participants in an illegal transaction. Being in the wrong place during one of these operations is an unpleasant and time-consuming experience, even if you are ultimately released without charge. Buy genuine Malaysian goods. There are extraordinary ones: real batik, real pewter, real local craft, and food products that are worth far more as souvenirs than a fake watch. Leave the counterfeit market alone. 11. Crossing into Singapore with less than a quarter tank of fuel. This one is so specific and so obscure that even people who have driven between Malaysia and Singapore multiple times are sometimes unaware of it.
Singapore has a law, enforced at the George-Singapore Causeway and the Second Link Crossing, that requires vehicles registered in Singapore to have at least 3/4 of a tank of fuel when leaving Singapore for Malaysia. The purpose of the law is to prevent Singaporeans from driving into Malaysia solely to take advantage of Malaysia's significantly cheaper fuel prices, essentially petrol tourism, and then returning to Singapore on a full tank. Now, this law is specifically a Singapore law applied to Singapore-registered vehicles. If you are driving a Malaysian-registered rental car from Malaysia into Singapore and back, it does not directly apply to you in the same way. However, if you are renting a car in Malaysia for a road trip that includes crossing into Singapore, and this is a very common tourist activity, you need to understand the fuel rules clearly before you approach either border. Certain rental agreements in Malaysia also have specific terms about fuel levels when crossing borders. Being stopped at the causeway for a fuel check when you are driving a rental vehicle with unclear documentation is a confusing and frustrating situation that can add hours to your journey. Fill up before you cross, in any direction. It is the simplest possible solution. What I hope this video has done is not scared you about Malaysia. I genuinely mean that. These laws are not traps set for tourists. They are the legal fabric of a country with its own history, its own values, and its own way of doing things. What they require from you as a visitor is something that every good traveler should already be doing, taking the country you are visiting seriously enough to learn about it before you land. Not just the food, not just the hotel, the actual place, the actual rules, the actual culture. When you do that, when you arrive in Malaysia with genuine knowledge and genuine respect, you will have a trip that is richer, smoother, and more rewarding than any amount of spontaneous winging it could produce. Malaysia is extraordinary. Go knowing what you're walking into and enjoy every single second of it. If this was useful, like the video, subscribe for more content that actually tells you what you need to know, and drop a comment below. Which one of these surprised you the most? I genuinely want to know. See you in the next one.